Hello and welcome to Global Mission to Peace TV, and this is a Mystic View. I am Radagast and I am here with my co-host Shelley. Hello, Shelley.
Hello everyone.
And the topic we're going to be tossing around today will be Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and also Yeti. We'll kind of pull those words apart a little bit and talk what conclusions we've come to about whether they're mythical, real, and possibly who they are from a genetic point of view. I usually start things off, but I don't know, Shelley, would you like me to do the normal kind of intro, or would you like to begin this one?
Well, I like it when you do your normal intro, but I will add one thing from Mark Twain that I think is particularly appropriate for the Bigfoot conversation. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Mm-hmm. And that was Mark Twain.
All right. One of the things that got me, I've been, following some of the Bigfoot stories on the different forums. Matter of fact, on the One Truth forum that I'm a regular member of, they have a Sasquatch 2.0, because I guess there was a Sasquatch 1.0. And it's actually probably the most viewed thread on the forum besides my own, Roscoe Tentet Tot. Tot means the One Truth. That's the acronym for the One Truth. And they've had a lot of videos, and there are certain people, one guy's name, I guess is Mike, I forget his last name. Maybe he doesn't even use a last name. And there's a Bigfoot research community. Now, one of the problems with from what I can tell, the typical research community is there's a lot of, let's call it, infighting and turf wars over like who kind of is the premier Sasquatch interviewer. Because, again, we get into donations and who has the bigger, again, money's apparently is involved at some level of this. And of course, that always creates silliness, minimal silliness. But there's been a lot of information I've been able to glean, and apparently Sasquatch, which is one of the Northwest tribes names for this particular cryptid hominid, cryptid meaning, kind of unknown secret, and hominid, human-like, walks on two legs. So they call it, one of the major languages there is Sasquatch. So again, it got adopted. There are many languages, and they have been dealing with Sasquatch for centuries. It is an accepted fact. Like there's salmon in there, in the water there. There's Sasquatch in the forest. All right. Sasquatch is as real as a salmon for them. And as we all know, salmon is not some kind of mythological creature. That's because they end up on our plates. I'm not sure we would want Sasquatch on our plate. So we kind of get into who's who. Now, we all know that, I guess before we knew Sasquatch, there was the mythical creature, the abominable snowman, which is really nothing more than an English usage word for a word from Asia known as the Yeti. From I know the Tibetan people were fairly familiar with the Yeti. And then I'll introduce another word later on that the Mongolians have. But so the Yeti is kind of the equivalent of the English abominable snowman, and Sasquatch has the English equivalent of Bigfoot. Now, it would seem that from sightings, here I am in southwestern Virginia, and just across on the other side of the Appalachians in places like Kentucky and even going further west, but wildernessy mountains seem to be, again, they're reclusive. And they have very good reasons for being reclusive from good old boys with guns that shoot anything with hair that moves in the woods. And but apparently there's a population probably not 200 miles from where I live. And from the little bit that I've read, that population is considered particularly a hostile population. But of course, that group of Sasquatch is living with a particularly, people with a lot of guns who hunt for a living or hunt for joy or whatever. They do a little whatever. We're not going to typify why they hunt. They hunt. And so those Sasquatch in those part of our Appalachian hills of America find that regular humans are somebody you want to avoid at all costs, because if they see you, they're probably going to shoot you. So apparently whenever an unarmed human runs into a Sasquatch, they've probably run into a Sasquatch that's lost a family member to one of them. So apparently there's some serious Hatfield and McCoys going on between the Sasquatch in this part of America and the human population. Where in the Northwest, where it's more of the indigenous population who've been living side by side with these creatures for hundreds, if probably thousands of years. And there have been some reports that occasionally children get kidnapped. And who knows, that might all be about trying to get closer to humans, or just a fascination. But there isn't that enmity between the races. So the dynamics between these creatures and human beings I think is highly dependent on the human population and how they treat the creatures to begin with. But getting back to some Native Americans, there was, just like we know there were animal whisperers, well, apparently there are Bigfoot whisperers, people who are able to communicate telepathically with these Sasquatch, and some of them actually have some pretty rich stories. And then I will also mention a genetic researcher. Her name is Dr. Melba Ketchum, and she actually, from the sound of her voice, she has a bit of a twang, so I'm going to guess she's a little bit in this part of the Appalachian part of the world, because she has a twang rather than the deeper, kind of almost what we call a drawl of the Deep South. So I'm thinking she's more Appalachian. And so she had been gifted a piece of some hair and also a little piece of flesh. And when she sent it out, now she was in the field. She was somebody of some note, she was a very respected researcher. And when some of these results came back in and she started to tell some of the research, especially the big labs, what she had given them a sample of, they actually, if they took money, they refunded it. If she owed them money, they didn't want it. And most importantly, they distanced themselves and said, you have our research, but you don't have our permission to publish it. So rather than them being thrilled that they had found some kind of new species and that now this creature was a scientific reality, they immediately distanced themselves. And this looks like a form of cover-up, which of course, which means that what we're looking for here is another form of disclosure. I'm going to stop just for a second here. So it looks like you could probably come in here, Shelley.
Well, I really would like to come back to the idea that they communicate with telepathy, but just to address that there are more genome projects that have addressed this question. And in fact, there was a fellow even in Calgary here, where I'm at, that has done years and years of research and taken it to, kind of the university level labs and so on. And it's a mixed bag with the response that these people get. And it really comes down to who's the researcher that you can hook up with that's actually interested in considering perhaps even the physics. Even Carl Jung had referred to this, although he was referring to them as the idea of spirit beings being able to orchestrate kind of those meaningful occurrences. So that's what he was suggesting. But even modern physics has opened up many questions concerning the forms that matter can take. So is Bigfoot, as we have always heard and alluded to, that they can vanish into thin air, that they communicate telepathically. You see them now, and next second they're completely gone. A little bit like the Menahunis and the gnomes and the dwarf people. So there's a lot of pretty interesting mystery, but what I really love most about it is that it just opens our eyes to confirm and validate that there is so much more to this world and our life than we really spend any time giving credit to. We are so much more than our five senses.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, my own personal theory is, because it seems to come from our legends that at one time we were telepathic. And I believe that our telepathy is something that we shut off ourselves when we started keeping secrets from each other. Back when we were honest and open with each other, telepathy was something that we could share. The moment we started to compartmentalize and maybe think thoughts or have plans that were not in the collective's better interest, we started shutting things off.
Well, that sounds like it goes back to Eve. As soon as they found out in the garden that they were naked, then they had to hide. That's where they started losing their abilities. And so, I mean, not to say that that's a literal interpretation or otherwise, but I agree with you. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I really see that. To me, it's really obvious that the average, oh, I wish I could practice telepathy. Telepathy is about the ability to share with each other. And that sharing does not work when you're going to have like a firewall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one thing to have private thoughts. Private thoughts don't need a firewall, because everybody kind of almost doesn't want to know that. But there was basically when you're holding thoughts that are not in the interest of other parties, especially the collective, because we are social beings. We're meant to be at least minimally in clans or tribes. So anybody who is having thoughts that are not for the good of the tribe is it's like in your body. If you have a liver cell that doesn't want to perform like a liver cell, you have a problem.
Right. There is a hygiene to telepathy.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so, I mean, really, when we are ready to be really straight with each other, telepathy will return. It's not something that, I mean, we can't go, suddenly go into some photon belt or the fourth dimension and suddenly telepathy returns. Telepathy is contingent upon your own, again, as Shelley used the word hygiene, your own concepts of what it is to be in community, what it is to be in society, the agreements we have to make, especially unspoken agreements with each other to cooperate. And anytime we start to get too individualized to the point where our good is better than the common good, you're going to start shutting things down. And that's, and so that's probably, we're not going to, there's not going to be any magical wand, regardless of where we pass through the galaxy, that's going to shift the decisions that we make, and whether or not we're going to listen to our heart, which is an honest voice, or do a little mixing and matching, we'll call
it. Incrementally, I see it returning stronger and stronger. So I think globally, we have reached that place where fear is no longer the issue, and that's what prevented people from wanting to share, was the fear. But anyways, getting back to Bigfoot, again, there's a lot of fear around this issue, other than the kind of the adrenaline junkies and the just pure curious researchers that want to know. There's a considerable amount of fear that say you run into Sasquatch, Yeti out in the hills. If you're emitting all this fear, how are they going to respond to you? If you're emitting fear, you're going to have a different experience. Yeah,
well, the Yeti are wise. They're a wise form of human. They're a form of human. I mean, the results of the test of Dr. Melba Ketchum from the mitochondrial DNA, that this particular Sasquatch, and it seemed like it came from a tribe, had a human mother, 100% human mother. All right. So if you have a human mother, that kind of that makes you a really, really close relative, regardless of who dad was. And apparently, if it's really clear that the mother was human, dad was some kind of hairy thing.
Okay, you mentioned earlier, was it lemur? What was it?
A lemur.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's also stories and myths about that being part of our ancestry anyways.
Darwin. It's not even, I mean, it's accepted science from, I mean, you know, again, make what you want of accepted science, but the accepted science is our distant relative was a lemur.
Right.
Because
And
it's also a distant relative of the great apes also.
but that was also part of the research analysis that came back from that particular study, was it not?
Well, apparently her educated guess was because the paternal side had no living DNA sample that was a match. But apparently when she started looking in the wild for close matches, the closest match would be a lemur. But she theorized that the lemur, now the other thing is they could plot when this mutation of humanity, because it was a mutation because it had a human mother. This mutation occurred about 15,000 years ago. And so what she's kind of postulating is that the father was some kind of lemur of some sort that was around 15,000 years ago. Now, before any last ice age, we had what is known as megafauna. Okay, you know, just like, you know, so, and there were giant lemur type creatures. So, I mean, again, now there is no supposition that it was a human mother. The supposition is on the paternal side. So apparently the educated guess is some form of lemur instead of an ape. Huh?
Potentially some form of lemur that's able to travel between dimensions or turn 90 degrees and do a little disappearing act that we in our third dimensional understanding and comprehension haven't quite figured out how to do yet.
Well, I would like to think that, first of all, humans had that. No, I'm not like I know that humans had that ability. Even now with shamans talk about the way to disappear is you turn 90 degrees to this reality in your mind and you disappear. It's kind of like you turn your energy body 90 degrees and then you kind of go out of phase with the visibility. It's not like you disappear, but you disappear from being seen by somebody.
Right, and this is a well-documented strategy or technique for seeing into other dimensions or other densities, right, is to really engage that peripheral vision.
Yes.
Without looking directly at it. I mean, really 90 degrees.
Right. I think we might even mention another mystic view that I think I kind of get that from our central point of our stereoscopic view, that it's basically a 90-degree field that goes out. You know, of course, the further it goes out, the more it encompasses the horizon. But up relatively close, you actually have spots that you can see things peripherally, but I believe because I think you could then see things that if you went and turned, you wouldn't see. But if you could actually, you know, not react to it with your normal instinct to look directly at something and could hold your kind of forward gaze while you look over here on the side, that you might be able then to see a little bit more of things that are normal visible spectrum is not included. And once we get outside of our visible spectrum, it's amazing what we cannot perceive visually simply because of our spectrum limitations.
Right.
Basically, one octave. Yeah. I mean, think of a piano with only goes from C to C. That's the equivalent of our visual sight. I mean, you wouldn't be able to write any sonatas on that.
Well, you know, something else that's interesting. Okay, all the stories I've ever heard about have always been these kind of like loving tales where they don't always start out loving, but rescues, for example, or where they make friends with the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch, or leave it presents or so on. But oftentimes, for the ones that are frightened, they all kind of report the same sort of sensation that they feel almost paralyzed, that they describe this kind of, well, they're talking about kidneys, but that could be just fear. That's an emotional, placement that they're talking about. But they often will talk about burning sensations and this paralyzing kind of inability to move. Now, I'm not talking just fear. I'm saying that somehow Bigfoot is able to perhaps telepathically or engage a frequency that can create that type of response, perhaps for its own safety,
Yeah.
And you had read or told me something about them also having a gland that they could voluntarily emit. Was that in your research or
Yes. Apparently one of the, let's call him one of the whisperers, one of the people who could communicate, was told by the Sasquatch themselves that they have the ability to, that like a lot of times, that they have the ability to put out a scent that not only will make you really be almost incapacitated with the need to throw up, maybe even actually throwing up, but there's another component that is almost paralytic.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the people who did have a chance to examine the body of a dead Sasquatch said that the scent, a wounded one. It was a wound. It had been burned in one of the fires in the Northwest. And the medics called, and he was able to examine this. And of course, they were all sworn to secrecy. But his report was that it had a smell like a horse, but not like a horse. Basically, what he was trying to say is just like a horse has a smell.
Mm-hmm.
They have a smell, like a dog has a smell. But a horse being bigger, you might have to pet a dog to smell it. Although some dogs, boy, you don't have to pet them. But basically that it kind of gave off an odor the way a horse did, but it didn't smell like a horse. But he kind of put it on that same kind of let's call it that intensity level, which isn't really intense. It's just you can smell it. And apparently that was I think it might have been from that research where it was also mentioned that somebody who had communicated, one of the Native Americans communicated with, was also saying that they have the ability to put out a scent that will basically stop people in their tracks. And that apparently any organic compound will break down and become nothing. So, but if somebody has used that scent in maybe a day or so, and then you track them down, they might still be wearing some, so to speak, and could be unpleasant. But I mean, I thought that was very interesting that he said that they actually don't stink if they're not frightened.
Mm-hmm. But they also have the ability to induce a response from human and potentially other animals on the planet. Also, some of the things that I read indicated that they like electricity, that they're drawn to kind of sources of electricity. Well, that lent itself to the whole poltergeist, and then all the stories really kind of took off going in every direction. And that's what we have with these kind of stories when we don't have actual validation from our science. That's the slippery slope we're on here talking about this.
Well, interestingly enough, that's the first time I'm hearing that. So of course, while you're speaking, I'm looking for some gnosis.
Yeah.
And so what I'm thinking is, with a lot of, Sasquatch is a hunter. They have to feed themselves. And like almost any, the Aboriginals before they were chased into the outback, supposedly were also strictly vegetarian, but when they got chased into the desert, being a vegetarian wasn't an option anymore. So I'm quite sure, and so you don't get many berries in the forest. Most berries kind of grow in meadows and, kind of open areas. So you could, any thought that you might want to live almost like a black bear. A black bear will eat anything. They're omnivorous, but they're largely vegetarian.
Right, but they're probably not relying on earth food. All indicators say that they can move into other realms.
But no, they do. Apparently, from what I'm hearing, that they actually live three-dimensional lives that they really go to other realms either for communication or for safety. But they're part of Mother Earth. They are a Mother Earth being and interact with much of the Earth beings that humans don't, like the nature spirits, all the little gnome all the rest of that's all the things that we don't know are there, but people who, if you go back far enough, you worked with these people to get a lot of their knowledge to begin with. So the natural world is quite populated with beings that straddle dimensions. And so I consider them to be, and a lot of the elementals actually can live very three-dimensionally, but they're kind of dimensional straddlers. But if you go in your backyard and cut down your three-dimensional patch of wild growth, you disturb their home. They are dependent on the three-dimensional energy signatures that they live in there, which brings me back to maybe why they're attracted to electrical fields, because they sense it, they feel this, energy pulsation, so they're drawn to investigate it because they can feel it out there.
Mm-hmm.
So my what I kind of got was, it isn't so much that they actually have a particular interest in electricity as investigating this field that they can sense.
Right. Well, in any case, our ancestors, our local ancestors, Earth ancestors, have talked about Bigfoot and kind of derivative thereof. Everything from Manahuni, that would be obviously Hawaiian, but the leprechauns of the Irish descent. And I know that the Manahuni had the equivalent of giant Manahuni that was described every bit the same as Bigfoot. And they were considered to be forest-dwelling people. They were just large, and they were considered hunters. And they were also connected back to Mu. So this is like Lemurian era. That's how well accepted, kind of in the Aboriginal or the First Nations and Aboriginal type communities. It's just an accepted, known fact. It's not really even, is it true or is it not true? It's just an accepted fact. And here's our stories about what the ancestors say about them.
Well, to me, what's one of the questions that serious researchers would love probably to get answered is whether or not the Yeti of Asia, especially the higher areas of Asia, and the Sasquatch are maybe different. I mean, according to Dr. Melba Ketchum, the matrilineal side of the specimen she had came from a human that was alive 15,000 years ago, which would be kind of a Cro-Magnon or modern human. Whereas the Yeti might be descended from a Denisovian or Neanderthal type, in which case they would have different possible matrilineal things and even having different patrilineal contributions. So that's the other thing, is if Sasquatch is a different being, type of hominid than the Yeti is, and then also whether or not, even in America, whether or not, like the Sasquatch, maybe the Bigfoot that she had, is that the same as the Bigfoot that's in the Northwest? Are these the same? I'm getting the feeling that the North American Sasquatch is somehow different than the Asian Yeti.
Well, that's kind of fun. I like that because how many different types of humanoid species might exist? But look, we also have Ogopogo, Loch Ness Monster. They're similar in appearance, but they're not considered to be the same species. But that takes us to Inner Earth. There's so many other wonderful mysteries that tie into the subject.
Well, I think the one thing they certainly share is that getting known by us is bad news. It's one whisper that she told a story of communicate. This one Yeti that was this one Sasquatch was communicating with a woman that told her, by the way, we stole a gallon of antifreeze out of your out of your garage, and we apologize for that. But we needed it because we had a problem within our tribe, and we were going to use that. Basically, it's almost like hemlock was given to Socrates. They had a problem in their tribe, and their decision was that this part of their tribe had to drink the antifreeze because it would kill them. And the reason that they were doing this is because he had killed the female. And the interesting thing was, what was the source of this highly emotional charge? Because apparently this one larger male Sasquatch killed a female, and the whole issue was contact with humans. This female was feeling a certain amount of desire to contact humans, and this older male Sasquatch said, "This is dumb. This is dangerous. These people are going to kill us." I mean, and there's a lot of wisdom to that. And apparently this female got in his face, and he got upset about it, and he hit her so hard that he ended up killing her or something.
Well, there's similar stories about our own First Nations people when someone has had contact the other way with the Bigfoot, with the Sasquatch. They even attached it to the whole Wendigo idea, that they needed to be eliminated because otherwise they're just going to go crazy infecting other people with whatever the bad energy that was associated with having communicated. But those things are rare. I mostly hear really beautiful, touching stories where harmony is the inevitable outcome, and it's all about communication. And that's probably key for us. No matter what we're thinking or talking about, is communication. We can open our hearts and minds to communicate with everything on this planet that's going to allow us to get beyond our five senses that has limited perhaps our ability to see not only Sasquatch, but Loch Ness Monster, but so many of these things that exist, or even between dimensions.
Yeah, well, I understand this desire, and I think it's a well-founded one to want to communicate and connect. But the wisdom of some of these elders is that they can meet some really fine human beings that they know they can interact with. But somebody's at a restaurant and they mention, "Oh yeah, we know Sasquatch," and then somebody overhears them in the next booth, and the next thing you know, there's some people in pickup trucks with shotguns or rifles. Oh, we want to invest. Their big problem is not that there aren't some really fine human beings, it's that we live with other human beings who have some serious emotional problems. And
it all comes back to fear.
Yes, fear and also, again, this, we'll call it the mighty hunter syndrome. It gets just really retarded sometimes. I mean, seriously retarded at a human level and an emotional level. And so what it is I guess the older, forward-thinking Sasquatch are just saying, yes, this is a very sweet story, but this can get out in a nanosecond. This can get out in a conversation that you at a cafe or a diner, and somebody else hears you say something, and next thing you know, morons arrive. And they're charged with looking out for their clan. And so so I'm quite sure they'll have some younger ones who go, "But I met these humans and they're so nice." I'm quite sure they are, but you don't understand. In a heartbeat, this suddenly becomes a forest fire, and our whole lives are threatened. So I can see how that could create stresses within their clan, where everybody has a good heart, but part of really being in your heart without the emotionality is that you really allow your heart to tell you wisdom. And wisdom is not emotional. It allows you to see the big picture and allows you to make decisions that might not be soft and cuddly.
Well, one of the options is to kind of expand our not tolerance, not compassion, but who said it really well was Dr. McCoy, of course, Star Trek wisdom here, but life, but just not life as we know it. There's so many forms of life that we, in our third dimensional beta brains, aren't even aware of.
Well, our own friend Butch Robbins, what he told me was, like he says, so some people are going, okay, so we have this Black Lives Matter. No, and people know we need to fix it to all lives matter. And Butch refined said, no, that's not enough. We need all life matters.
Right.
Because lives kind of keeps it to human. He goes, life. We're talking about the forest, the life of the ocean. All life matters. And and I thought that was a pretty good fix, and he did.
That's really good. I have a lot of quotes from that guy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Butch.
Yes. So part of what we're trying to get to here is whether or not, I guess there's probably a lot of people, including some of our listeners, who might go, are these cryptid hominids, these Bigfoot, Yetis, call them what you will, are they for real? My conclusion, I think, is yours, Shelley, is yes, they are real. Real. There's nothing mythic about this. Are all the details in? Are who they really are, where they come from in? No. But are there populations, and do they live all over the world, especially in North America, in our forests? Yes, they do. They are real. This is not some kind of silly story. Now, I did want to mention there's the Mongolians have a people they call the Almas.
Right.
And they aren't even sure that they're not a race of humans. Mongolian people who are come in contact with them think they might be an older race of humans. Apparently, a form of kind of Neanderthal that was more further east was called the Denisovian. And so these could be Denisovians. These could be Denisovians mixing with the Yeti. I mean, we're in case where this one Sasquatch is identified as having had a human mother, these might have Neanderthal or Denisovian mothers.
Right. Well, I think the most important bottom line here is that we know we can open our minds to the potential that there's more existing than what these peepers are showing us, than what our five senses are telling us. There's just so much more. And if we want to develop into telepathy, that's what we need to realize. That's the first step, is to accept that and how many times it's been said, it's all about frequency. We're just frequency.
Yes. And step into oneness and love.
Hey, and oneness. I mean,
I'm quoting you.
Yeah. Thank you. I love one. It always comes back to oneness, but just for the people who feel like we're maybe compromising their important religious beliefs or something, well, guess what? Even God had to make the Bigfoot. We're not saying even God would have to create the Enki and the Enlil from the Anunnaki. You know what? We're all one.
Yeah.
Let's just explore and learn more about who we are, because if this oneness that we're describing doesn't tell you that Bigfoot has to be a part of you somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people who have really good hearts, and there's apparently some Sasquatches that also have very good hearts. And I know that the natural instinct is for us to be friends with each other. Any decent person in their heart, actually, to me, hearing the living right now in the moment God of your being, would say, yeah, of course you should all be sharing the planet that was created for everything that's on it. I mean, doesn't it make sense? Of course you're supposed to share.
We humans are harmony walkers. That's what we are. But there are species who don't really put too much time and effort and status to being in harmony.
But I would caution, again, people might go, oh, I need to go out and make connection with Bigfoot. Please realize that you represent a people that has a lot of, they're troubled. You represent a race with a lot of troubled people, and they're highly armed. And so as much as there might be dwellers in the forest that would really love to interact with just you, they'd probably have to kidnap you and keep you there, because it's the only way they'd be safe. It's really complicated, because we, the human species, we don't get along. yet. We're getting there. And I think the internet is facilitating that at a huge rate. And I think if, we could only get the globalist controllers. Now, people like to call them the cabal, like to call them the elite. The last thing I want to call them is elite. The last thing I want to call these people is elite. Elite is something good. And the people I'm referring to are not good. They're misguided. And so I feel part of what's keeping us from just at our own human race connecting is the people who don't want us connected. They benefit from having us at each other's throats. And so I really feel that before we can as a species do interspecies connection, we have to do intraspecies connection.
Yes, clean up our own backyards.
Mm-hmm. So just the name of this doctor, because she has things out there. Her name is Dr. Melba Ketchum, 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 Melba, MELBA. And please be aware that because of the serious science that she has, because of what she's done, that the globalist controllers have all kinds of people out there dissing her finds, including some sister kissing cousin Marion backwoods boy who apparently shot one, and then he supposedly gave her a DNA sample. And then he has all kinds of stories, and even when you read his story, I mean, they didn't even put his picture up because they said his lion eyes would have shown that he was not being straight. And of course, a lot of these people do come from very humble backgrounds. And if you have a government agent that comes by and says, we got a little suitcase for you, mm-hmm. Then they're not. It's not too hard to get what you need for cover. I mean, really, basically, you could say there's a huge disinformation campaign against Dr. Ketchum's work. Now, this is not to say that her work is impeccable. She's not getting cooperation from the people who could make her work impeccable. Mm-hmm. But she has done due diligence, and before some doors closed, she has some serious stuff. And basically, the Sasquatch she had a human mother 15,000 years ago, because they can actually trace the timing of the mitochondrial DNA.
And did you know, I think I've shared this with you before, but speaking of those controllers of our planet, whenever there is Bigfoot sightings posted in the mainstream media, that is often a signal that there will be a false flag in a few days. That has often happened. Mm. It's like one of their little intel codes. But so we're not telling you that we've seen Bigfoot. We're just discussing Sasquatch and all the possibilities that might mean for us living on this planet.
Well, wait just one second to put my avatar for a second, because I'm my freshly shampooed hair, it needs constant adjustment, and I don't really want to be doing it all alone. Well, I have a feeling that there's probably some veracity to that Bigfoot false flag thing, but right now we're in false flag open season. So I think some of those things, I think there might not be enough time. It's an overdrive right now. Right, it is. Mm-hmm. Things are changing really rapidly. People are seeing the heavy-handed nature of the globalist controllers, and they're starting to react, and they're scaring the controllers. The controllers are getting nervous, and so they cannot throw out enough distractions, and those distractions take the form of horrific things, coups, people mowing people down by a truck. And of course, you follow the stories from one minute, it's a bunch of weapons in the back, and then they find out all the weapons were fake or duds, and then the story changes. They just conveniently drop out that there were weapons there because the story fell apart. So let's just drop the part of the story that fell apart. But you need to have it. You have to keep your wits about you, and you also have to keep a little bit of a memory. We have been entrained a little bit, especially through the TV years, of having a short attention span. We need to do due diligence on ourselves and have a greater attention span, because you can't connect dots that you can't remember. So just please start trying to keep a little bit of a mental memory diary of some of the things going, so that you can, so when things happen and you start to connect dots, because these don't connect at all.
Mm-hmm.
And more people are doing that. And that is why the controllers and the globalists are really nervous. This is slipping out of their control. This was not part of their plans. It turns out that the goldfish weren't so goldfishy, that the useless eaters aren't so useless, that the expendables actually have some wits about them. This is not turning out as they conceived. And they're just losing control quickly, and they're trying to do anything, even if they can't get control, to make sure that we are kept running in circles.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, they actually never were that clever. They were only good at keeping us distracted, fluoridated, and so on. Yeah, but that's over. We're moving on.
Yes. So anyway, so that's what we thought that, I mean, Bigfoot has been popping up in at least my consciousness. And when I found out about Dr. Melba Ketchum and some actual real hardcore DNA sampling, and the fact that this was a human mother, it just seemed like a story worth telling. And also just that there is a group of beings on this planet that live in the forest, basically all over the world. They might not be the same creature, but they're real. This is not some conspiracy theory. It's not some kind of a silly new age story. It's not myth, legend. I mean, the details might incorporate some myth and legend, but the core fact that there are another race of beings, probably, certainly not at our population levels, that live in the wild areas, and sometimes not so wild areas, to me is an absolutely a conclusive fact. They do exist, and if they didn't exist, there wouldn't be cover-ups. There wouldn't be the major genome labs that when they give you a preliminary report and they go, by the way, what is it we're looking at? And you tell them, they go, oh, never mind, no, just skip that report completely. That's not science. Science is supposed to be curious. Science is supposed to be absolutely fascinated with any new lead it gets, and let's just use our modern scientific tools to parse it out and get to the core of it. When you see science going, oh no, that's not science, that's politics. Mm-hmm. And when we want science, not politics. And so that's the other. So please understand that anybody saying, oh no, there are no Bigfoot, that's politics. That's not science. And we at Mystic View try to bring the right and the left hemisphere of the brains together, so you get true sacred science, where we want data and then we interpret it and we bring it into the big picture, and that's the Mystic View.
And that is the Mystic View.
Okay, thank you all for being with us while we discuss Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and hope you enjoyed it.
See you again.
And God bless you all.